Okay, hi everybody. Today is Wednesday, October 28th. You are at the k8s Infra Working Group meeting, bi-weekly meeting. I am your host today, Aaron Krickenberger, also known as SpiffXP on all the places. This meeting, like all Kubernetes meetings, is a space where we expect people to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct, by basically being their best selves. If you have any concerns with anybody's behavior at this meeting, you are welcome to reach out to me. Or if I'm the problem, you're also welcome to reach out to conduct@kubernetes.io to make sure we're actually adhering to the code of conduct. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube publicly as soon as Zoom and YouTube are done processing it. With that, I thought we would go to sort of our regularly recurring topics. And I was wondering if there was anybody who was new to this meeting who wanted to introduce themselves.
I
Okay.
think I'm new to this meeting. I'm Antonio Gea. I think that you know me for working in IPv6 related things. Well,
Hey, Antonio.
I know
I'm
that guy.
trying to help a bit more here. I always wanted to have more time to spend with you. And well, let's see if I can follow up on these meetings.
That is cool. Yes, really appreciate all the work you've been doing to help make IPv6 a reality and keep kind and the project awesome. Okay. So our next regularly scheduled thing would be just taking a look at our billing data for the past 28 days and seeing if anything jumps out. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Wow, the window is really large compared to the size of the billing report. Let's make that a little bit smaller.
So I'm looking at the Cloud Console view to cross-check,
Okay.
and its query is the last 30 days, the easy query. But the last 30 days is about 119,000. If you add 2 days at a couple $1,000s a piece, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, I could go change the calendar too. I just looked at
No, that's
rounding
fine.
up. 30-day month, $3,000 to $4,000 a day, 2 days. Yeah, we're within spitting distance of the same. So I continue to have faith in the billing report.
The other thing I like to do with this, for what it's worth, is I just kind of knock out the artifact related stuff. So that gives us an idea of what our CI costs look like without all the traffic to k8s.gcr.io. So this is roughly what our spend looks like for project CI, and then also running all the infrastructure in the AAA cluster. So this would pick up all of the cloud build related jobs to push things into the staging GCR repos. This would pick up Proud jobs. This would pick up usage of Triage Party and GCS Web and things like that.
Yep, my numbers concur with that, again, within spitting distance.
Okay, cool. And no great surprises here. You see the nice wavy pattern because we're getting the pre-submits from daily GitHub traffic. Any questions? Okay.
So the comment, to date, we've not really spent any time, not much time, trying to optimize for this. At this point, I think that is still the right choice. I don't think it's worth the energy in particular to try to drive these numbers down. There probably will come a time when it's worth our group spending time on that. I don't think that time is now.
I would agree with that. I think the ballpark extrapolation is where if you take what our past 28 days was and multiply it by 12, we're just short of 1.5 million per year, which gives us another 1.5 to work with.
Right.
And so if we find we're starting to, Go ahead.
So one of the things on my to-do list is to do a slightly more detailed projection than that, like taking into account the slope of the organic growth of what we currently have. I'm happy that we haven't significantly changed anything in the last few months. It helps me to make that projection, but it's on my to-do list.
Okay.
Just a quick question for you guys. Is that paid for with Google provided credits, or is that paid for by the CNCF? Or
it is paid for by the CNCF through credits that were provided to CNCF by Google.
Awesome. Thank you.
So the goal here is complete transparency.
Yeah. We gave the credits to the CNCF, but we did ask that the CNCF reserve usage of these credits solely for the Kubernetes project, not any of the other CNCF projects. Because I know there's been some discussion about like getting Helm's charts and stuff away from Google-owned infrastructure. And I think that's laudable and great. Transparency above all else, and community-funded sustainable project operations are great, but these funds are for Kubernetes specifically.
And given the trajectory that we're on, it won't be very long before we're using up $3 million.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a recurring item in here about AI review, but frankly, I don't really recall anybody taking AIs from the past couple of meetings. So I'd like for us to, unless there's anything somebody wants to bring up. Okay. I figure we should move on to Antonio's agenda item about IPv6 support. So Antonio, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Well, I opened the issue, I think that 1 year ago or something, but since I was the only one using it, I really don't care. And this week or past week, somebody commented on the issue, and we are going to release dual stack. So I think that it will be a bit odd, claiming that Kubernetes has IPv6 and our web page or these things doesn't have IPv6. So I was checking into someone in the meeting commented about the next steps, and I was checking that the Google Cloud has an IPv6 termination. So I don't know if this is because some technical limitation or people not stepping up for doing it, because I can have time for implementing this.
Sorry, you cut out for just a second. What was the actual question?
The question is if this needs people to take on it for making it, or are there any technical limitation that stops this?
This being the V6 testing?
No, the publishing the web and the artifacts in IPv6.
Oh,
I mean, right now everything goes to redirect k8s.io, and it's an IPv4 record.
Let me think.
I feel like
there's a bunch.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
I was just gonna say, I feel like there are two questions here. The first is whether or not our DNS can support serving IPv6 addresses as well as IPv4 addresses, right?
Yeah, yes, it can.
Queries, which I believe it can. Second question is the infrastructure that some of these records point to, can that support IPv6? The comment posted in the issue specifically references apt.kubernetes.io, which is not community-owned infrastructure. I think that is basically Google's apt repository.
So I don't know how apt is set up. Aaron, do you even know who maintains the apt repo? It's on the list.
As far as I know, that points to Google's apt repo, which is managed by a Google internal tool called Rapture, and only Googlers have access to it. I am one of the Googlers who is in charge of responding to the release engineering team's requests to build Debian and RPM packages and pushing to that internal repo. But what it would be involved to move to community would be for the community to stand up their own repository and get packages there. I think the sticking point has always been that the signing keys that are used right now are Google's, which makes the packages relatively trustworthy. If the community stands up its own repos, it's going to need to decide what mechanism of trust it would like to use to ensure that the builds hosted by the community are in fact produced by the community and trustworthy. But so it just comes back to like, does GCP support IPv6? Does Google's internal app repo support IPv6? Or if we solved the DNS, would we still have this problem?
Well, I did a bit more of research. So I saw that you already have a IPv6 record. And the thing is that if checking out the Google Cloud documents, there is an IPv6 terminator load balancer. So everything that goes out of that load balancer is going to be IPv4. So my question is if you put one of these load balancers to redirect k8.io, everything should work in IPv6 right now, because for the internal infra is going to be IPv4 addresses.
That I don't know, Tim, I'm gonna maybe defer to your judgment on this, but A, that sounds sane, and B, it sounds like you are willing to experiment to verify that this is possible.
So I don't know how the app stuff is set up in the back and how we're exposing it. I imagine if it's through this normal Google apt site, then it's not through a cloud load balancer, but through a GSLB or a GFE rather, and which is our internal version of the cloud load balancer. And so the changing of that config would be more difficult. Now, if that's already exposed on v6, I mean, that's the question. Antonio, I missed that in the details. Do you know if the Google apt site is already exposed on v6?
No, that's my question. Is the when you resolve
no, it's not, or no, you don't. Sorry, no, it's not, or no, you don't know.
Well, when I checked last time, it was only IPv4. But
okay.
my question is, everything goes through this redirect endpoint. All the DNS records go. So if you
so that was my second question. That was my second point for you. Sorry, latency here, and I'm on the phone. I just looked that up, and yes, it goes through our redirect, which isn't IPv6. I think it's running through an ingress, so we could make it IPv6.
No,
so we could do go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, the thing is, my question is, reading your documentation, you have an IPv6 load balancer termination. That what does is it exposes an IPv6 address, and in the other side, it's working with IPv4 addresses. So if you are able to put that in front of redirect, you don't need to care about the internal infra being IPv4 only, because that external load balancer is going to do the heavy lifting. So that's why I'm asking, maybe if that thing works, it's just adding that load balancer and a triple and DNS record for IPv6 for ACE.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the backside too. So I just looked up the packages. So that redirects to packages.cloud.google.com, and packages.cloud is exposed on a v6 address. So if we did as you suggest, then it probably would just work.
Yeah, but I just was checking in with you. If you need help,
I have no objection to it. It's just not on wasn't on my radar. So if you want to go look at the k8s.io repo, we have the script that set up our the ingress for, not script, it's a YAML, the ingress YAML for, let me give you a directory in a second.
Yeah, Arnaud linked the specific line that sets up the apt Kubernetes IO.
Oh, there we go.
In chat.
Yeah. So in that directory, we could add an ingress. We have ingress, canary ingress prod YAML, so we could add another ingress that has a v6 address binding, and you can have them both point to the same backends. I think that should just work, and then we just add the DNS for it. I have no objections to trying it, and if it works, no objection to keeping it.
Okay, I need to explore this in detail, because I'm not familiar at all. Right.
Sure. If you look in that directory, you'll find ingress YAMLs. You should just be able to copy them. We can change the IP address, and you can take a look at the canary, the test script there, and adapt it for v6. I bet it just works.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for this info.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it up. I hadn't even really considered that. Always the banner carrier for IPv6.
Yeah, man. Sounds great. I think I don't necessarily want to speak for Tim, but I personally don't have the bandwidth to try this out myself. But as long as you're willing to try it out, I think we're in support of this. Yeah.
So I put aside a bunch of time over the next few weeks. I told Aaron this week. I put aside a bunch of time over the next few weeks. And I canceled a ton of internal meetings and stuff, because there's a bunch of things in community that have sort of languished for lack of attention. So I'm trying to get through those. This certainly can fit under that umbrella. Antonio, if you want to try it, I'm happy to take a look and do some manual poking at our end just to make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to work. But also, we should put you in the right groups that give you the authority to actually go try these things, so that it's not always Aaron or me who has to try these things. We should make sure that you have an appropriate permissions that you could actually do this.
As you wish. I mean, the way that you see that is easier for you, I mean, I will be happy, one or the other way.
Okay, we can talk separately.
Thank
you. Okay. Whoops, hang on. I hit my screen off hot corner too quickly there. Okay. Any other questions, comments, or concerns on IPv6? All right. Let's see. So next thing on the agenda was to talk about our progress on migrating the remainder of the release blocking and merge blocking jobs for Kubernetes to community-owned infrastructure. Just to summarize where we're at briefly, we've migrated all of those jobs except any of the build jobs. And that is because the build jobs currently write to a bucket called Kubernetes Release Dev, which is owned by the Google Containers GCP project, which doesn't allow outside Google accounts to write to it. And we also discovered there was a Kubernetes CI images GCR repo, which is locked down similarly. So we've gone through and created equivalent buckets and GCR repos over in k8s.io. Arnaud, did you want to kind of take it from there in terms of describing where we're at and what needs to be done?
Basically about the merging block jobs?
Yes.
So basically we need to migrate the job in charge of building the periodic k8s component to a new GCR repo. Once we do that, we need to ensure all the CI Kubernetes build jobs can consume this new GCR repo, and I think we are okay to migrate the rest of the jobs.
Okay. Yeah, thank you a bunch for pushing forward on this, Arnaud. So I posted a link in the meeting notes to a comment that sort of describes what the plan is. It can probably stand to be updated based on some of the work Arnaud has done. But I think once we sort out the build canary job, we're on track to basically have everything migrated within the next, let's say, week to 2 weeks to be safe. Which would be great, because then that means all of the jobs that merge and that block merges and Kubernetes releases are fully community owned. So that's about all I had to say on that. Any questions there? Okay. The next item on the agenda was from Arnaud about Prow staging instance.
So basically, the question is about two issue I'm facing. Basically, the current Pro instance running in the Google on a project. So the idea is to set up a staging Pro instance running in maybe AAA or any non-Google GKA cluster, so we can identify the pain point related to the migration to Pro, to the Pro migration. Also, the idea behind is to also use this staging instance to test Pro configurations.
Okay.
So basically, the idea is to run this staging instance against maybe a fork repo of KK.
Okay, right. I have objections to the idea of using, well, we'll see. I personally have objections to using forked repos or separate orgs for testing out Kubernetes and Kubernetes release changes. This came up in the GitHub management meeting where my microphone wasn't working. But essentially, it's not clear to me what that increased complexity will gain us that using branches cannot. And for better or for worse, once you start using a repo that's kind of off the beaten track and doesn't receive production level traffic, you don't get to see what issues arise with production traffic. And as much as it pains me to be a chair of SIG testing and talk about like using production to test things out, we just haven't really been able to find an equivalent proxy for actual production level traffic that the Kubernetes repos see. Like we have tried in the past, for example, to set up an instance of Prow that just exercised the test infra repo, which is in the top 5 repos that receives traffic. But we were still missing things that only appeared on the Kubernetes repo. So there is a proposal that was put forth a couple months ago through SIG testing. I'm gonna mess up who proposed it. I think it may have been Shi Zhang. It could have also been Chao Dai. I'm not sure which of them worked. I think both of them worked on it. But essentially, they're trying to propose using a staging Prow instance that has end-to-end tests sort of automatically open up pull requests and see Prow exercise that. Is just the start of a sanity, the start of like a smoke test against new Prow instances. And they had approached me about using community infra to host that, and it sounded too complicated to them. So I'm unclear whether that actually exists today. If it doesn't, I think if you want to take the lead on setting it up in AAA or elsewhere, that sounds great to me. Okay, I said a lot of words. Let me TLDR it. The idea of using a staging prow instance, great. That sounds good to me. We'll need to be careful about dueling prows. My experience is if you point to two prows against the same repo, it doesn't necessarily work out great all the time. So we'll have to figure out how to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because the idea behind the fork repo is having a fork repo, but we don't allow peer merging, and we have a periodic job that just doing push for us from the upstream. So we can just test the configuration and maybe the different plugins, but we don't allow post summit jobs to run against this fork repo.
Right. Yeah. Figuring out the trust model there is going to be a little complicated. So I feel like I would want to see a little bit more of a plan or a proposal for how it's going to be exercised. But I think at least just setting up an instance of Prow in community-owned infrastructure, I think we should do that. I personally do not have strong opinions whether we put that in the AAA cluster or if we stand up a separate cluster for it.
Okay.
I feel like the AAA cluster would probably be okay.
I was thinking the same, using a namespace in k8s for the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the Prow staging instance? All right. So I leave it to y'all. We have 30 minutes remaining. I can share my screen and we can walk through the board, or we can decide we'd like 30 minutes to go do whatever else we would prefer to do. I'm looking for some feedback on what you all want to do.
I haven't looked at the board in 2 months, so it might make sense to take a quick look.
Yeah, me either. And I think another thing that I have a question about is, are we ready for November 1st Docker Hub changes? Because from what I saw, we should be ready, right? Because there was some pull requests on test infra regarding the jobs to use the mirror.gcr.io registry, which basically should solve the issue, right?
I believe so. I am not caught up with all of yesterday's PR traffic, so maybe Ben went ahead and did some stuff that I have yet to see. I think he was still slightly uncertain whether or not kind clusters were going to automatically benefit from mirror.gcr.io or whether there was something that needed to be configured to make them use mirror.gcr.io.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Antonio, just since you're here and you're pretty prevalent and kind, do you have any idea where that's at?
No, I think that Benjamin was working with different solutions, but I didn't. I know that he's on it.
Okay.
I was talking with him, and he was checking the rate. I don't know. Honestly, I know that he is doing something, but I don't know what.
Okay. So just to summarize where I believe we're at is that all GKE clusters by default are configured to use mirror.gcr.io. So our Proud build clusters, when they pull down images to run pods, that's cached. Then any Kubernetes clusters that are stood up via kubeup.sh, which would be all the clusters used for release blocking and merge blocking jobs, are also configured to use mirror.gcr.io by default. So what that leaves are jobs that use Docker and Docker. So if a job runs a script that calls Docker pull or whatever, I think there is some configuration that needs to happen in the image to configure that instance of Docker to pull from mirror.gcr.io. And I had a PR I was working on to put that in the k8s image, but it could be somebody else got ahead of me on that. Just to share it briefly, the mirror.gcr.io repo, the team behind GCR is working in advance of the deadline to make sure that that has a much better hit rate than it usually does. So we anticipate that most of the images that are pulled frequently are going to be cached. If we find that's a problem, I'm still working through getting accounts from Docker to be able to pull in an unlimited manner. And what we would do is configure our clusters to tie image pull secrets to whichever service account is being used. That's going to require significantly more plumbing, but it shouldn't be too bad. So the biggest unknown for me would be end-to-end tests that stand up clusters using something other than kubeup.sh. So I'm thinking of the k8s jobs, and I'm thinking of the cluster API jobs. You know, we'll have to see what happens there. Does that answer your question, Claudia?
Yep, yeah. For what it's worth, last time I checked, all the Docker Hub images that are currently used in E2E test images in the E2E tests are mirrored on mirror.gcr.io.
Yep.
When I checked last week on Friday, it was still missing some images like Nginx 115-Alpine. But today when I checked, it is there, and they're all manifest lists. So that also covers all the architecture, all the other architecture types as well, not just Linux AMD 64.
Sorry, I feel like I missed. Do we have a catalog of all the images that we depend on that are being pulled from Docker Hub?
We have
enumerated that?
We have enumerated. So we've enumerated it a couple ways. I still don't think I've caught literally everything by all 1,700 of our jobs, but we've enumerated, looking through the Kubernetes code base, what images are pulled down for end-to-end tests. And we've also enumerated by looking at the community prow build clusters to see what images the kubelet is pulling down. So we've captured logs. I'll dig up the issue, but I've pasted comments on how Antonio went through the Kubernetes code base and how I went through the prow logs to find that. I was not able to enumerate that for the same level of detail for all of the 1,500-ish jobs that run in the google.com build cluster. That is where more of the like Kubernetes SIGs repos and stuff run. But enumerating another script that looks at all of the prow job YAML files and pulls the images out from that, there are very few Docker Hub images that are unpopular. So most of the Docker Hub images used by those jobs look like Golang, Python, Node, stuff like that.
Roger.
What I haven't been able to enumerate would be any script that runs Docker pull as a result of those jobs, because Docker pull isn't logged by kubelet, and the logging for the GKE clusters doesn't pick that up either, from what I can tell. So that we're going to have to find out. My anticipation is the majority of scripts that do that are probably building Docker images, and the majority of those jobs run in GCB, Google Cloud Build, which is also similarly, they anticipate they're going to be fine for Docker Hub. It is statistically very unlikely that we will run into problems with GCP. If we find that we can configure those jobs to use Mirror as well, but that doesn't seem to be necessary at this time.
Okay. What a mess. Thank you.
Yeah. I was so relieved to hear that they decided to push the pause button on the image retention changes, which don't matter to us at all. But like, honestly, most of the, because we have k8s.gcr.io, the majority of the project is very well shielded from this. It's more like the long tail of jobs that might get hit by this, but the really critical stuff is going to work just fine.
It's almost as if somebody years ago said, hey, this can't be free forever. We'd better build a barrier for here.
I wonder who had that incredible wisdom and foresight. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to navigate to find the board. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, let's share my screen. All right, how's that look? I'm hoping people can see that. So let's see. I'm just gonna walk backwards from blocked, if that's cool with people. So create an image promotion process. We've done that. However, I believe right. We need to make sure that the actual promotion jobs run in community-owned clusters. At the moment, the jobs are still running in the google.com trusted build cluster. At this point, I can think of no reason not to shift them over to community. I'm pretty sure Arnaud, you probably know enough to make them migrate, or anybody from the release engineering team should be capable of doing this. I know I saw Stephen ask why we couldn't do this, and I proposed that the release engineering team do this on one of the umbrella issues related to in the release engineering team taking more ownership of the container image promoter. Claudio, I see you have a comment here related to the Windows build stuff that you've been working on.
Yeah, we already merged that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're good there.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like once we've actually got all of the container image promotion stuff running on community infra, we can call this done.
I'd like to add maybe one small bump there. I want to make sure that the documentation for the end-to-end business of promoting images is up to snuff, so that somebody who isn't Linus or me, and even I struggled with it the last time it happened, can investigate any alert that goes off. And I'd like to try this by getting somebody who isn't Linus or me to respond to an alert that I can, I can push a dirty image, and I want somebody to come along and say, oh my gosh, this secret name was pushed, and if you can capture the flag, then I'm happy. Does that make sense?
So you want
this is too important not to test.
Okay.
I can talk for Stephen, but I'm pretty sure the SIG really is taking kind of ownership around everything related to promotion process.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That is a great answer. Do we have, like, we have Google groups for people who are in the promoter maintainers or promoter, I forget what the group is called, but we can look it up. I would like to make sure that there is ample coverage there and people who feel like they are responsible for it. Like if that alert goes off, last time it went off, nobody looked at it.
Yeah.
We don't need to do it right now. But I can bother Stephen. I can bother Stephen to get a couple of names on the hook.
Sure. I think it's kind of coming down to closing the loop on all this is run in the community, and that the community who is going to take ownership of this actually knows how to respond to a disaster scenario. And so it's
how to get the alert, where the logs are, how to react to it. And all the mechanisms exist, and I think Linus has written them down, but I'm not sure that they're all in one coherent place.
Right. Okay. So I don't think that's blocked, though. I think I'm going to put that back to in progress unless anybody objects.
Okay.
Okay. Wow, some of these. Per Kate's namespace billing information.
No progress from my side.
Yeah. Right. So
you know,
oh, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, given the shape of the billing report, like this should be a P2 or P3.
I agree. I was going to comment how like everything is, most things lack priority. I feel like we should do a better job of prioritizing. So I'm going to shift this to priority backlog if that's cool with people.
Yeah. This is a small drop in the bucket of the billing stuff. And it's interesting information, but not important.
Okay, so I'm going to kick this out of in progress back to the backlog. Or even, I'm just going to put it into needs triage. Develop a proud migration plan. I think Arno proposing a staging instance would help push this along. I also need to go through and update the status of this issue. So migrating all of the release blocking and merge blocking jobs, like I said, we're almost there. Greenhouse, the Bazel build cache, has been moved over. Setting up GitHub proxy in the trusted cluster, I believe Arno has taken care of that. Developing better ACLs to ensure that more of the community can actually see what is happening with Prow and feel empowered to troubleshoot it. I think we are most of the way there. We've set up a k8s-infra-Prow viewers group, which anybody is welcome to PR themselves into, and that gives you view access to all of the GCP projects that Prow uses or that the end-to-end tests run into. There's also a k8s-infra-Prow on-call group, which will give you owner access to those projects. I was thinking of possibly some group in the middle, or just augmenting the privileges of the viewers group to be able to do things like save logging queries and save monitoring dashboards and stuff to better empower the CI signal team. We have set up post-submit jobs so that if we change the resource files in the appropriate cluster directories for these clusters, they automatically get deployed. Right, and this is specifically what's holding back migrating all the release blocking jobs. So I think enumerating how we then get to setting up a staging Prow instance and what it would look like to shift traffic from one to the other and how we would decide we're ready to do that is probably what needs to be done next year. Any questions?
About GH proxying, I'm waiting someone or you to create the secret for the token related to the bot.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Okay. I've already covered migrating the release blocking jobs. Project artifact management task list. I also feel like it is less clear to me that this should remain in progress. Right. The checklist at the top of this issue is very bold and has big ideas about not just GCR hosting, but also GCS hosting for projects to use. And then also how to mirror this stuff to other clouds registries. And I think we should pick that conversation back up at some point in time. So I'm not necessarily sure that I want to continue to call this in progress, like parts of it are, but I feel like we're kind of stalled out on the repository mirroring. It's less clear to me where we're at for GCS buckets for projects to use. We've kind of done some one-offs for, I know we've done one for kind, but I think sort of a next step would be to figure out how to take the container image promoter and turn it into the artifact promoter. And I think Justin had mentioned he was working on that, but just hasn't been able to land that yet.
Yeah, I know Justin started looking at that. I honestly, I think we should, this issue is probably not worth the paper it's written on right now because it covers too much. I think there's two separate tracks here. One is, how are we going to set up GCR mirroring, container image mirroring, which we can tackle like today, right? We could start that work today if somebody wants to spearhead it. And how are we going to manage artifact promotion in a similar way? And then how are we going to mirror artifacts in a similar way? Yes, we could use artifact registry. I haven't used it myself, but we can look at all options as to how we want to do this. Like everything else, it needs a person to spend time on it who is vested in making it succeed.
Yeah, as far as artifact registry goes, I personally don't want to be forced to use it until there's a good reason to. It sounds like they will start a deprecation clock once that goes GA. It's currently beta. It's been beta since about March of this year. Once it goes GA, we have 6 months to switch from GCR to artifact registry. It should be relatively seamless, but there is some work involved. But I kind of want to put that on the back burner until we have to do it.
Yeah, and I don't buy the 6-month clock anyway. Like, we are a significant fraction of GCR's bandwidth right now. And so I think, I mean, maybe not significant, but we are a noticeable fraction.
Yeah.
I think that if we will work with them to make a graceful transition. Let's leave it there.
Okay.
But I'm eager if anybody wants to try to start figuring out how are we going to mirror container images? Like that seems very approachable now, right? Now that GCR is in the community space, how would we want to mirror those images to other hosting providers, and how do we want to address them? What are the requirements? What are the goals there?
Yep.
It feels like win-win, right? Like, Amazon customers should be able to pull it from within Amazon's network. That seems completely reasonable.
Yeah. Save on those egress charges.
But we lose all that sweet data.
The next issue is about moving Bosco's projects over. So these are the projects that are used by end-to-end tests. I honestly feel like I've done all of this. Let's see. Yes. So there is no way to create a template and then create a bunch of projects from a template. So we have a script that basically creates the projects and then documents the quota changes that had to be made to those projects manually by a human. Then we set up permissions, again, the k8s infra on call and viewers group for those projects. I've documented all the quotas that we need to request for the different project types and have done so. This includes for GPU projects, scalability, and ingress. And so the only follow-up thing I can think of is if we get to the point where we want to start doing per SIG billing of what is each SIG using or consuming in order to do testing, we might need to re-examine how we tag projects or maybe have projects live in different folders. But otherwise, I think this is done. Is there anything people think remains before I close this out? Okay. Closing out because it feels great. We got 3 minutes left. Is there any specific issue on the board that people wanted to talk about, or should I just keep walking? Okay. Storage analysis for billing. Yes.
Justin's and I started peeking at this a while back, and then it sort of fell off the bottom of the plate. I'm very eager to turn this back on. It's one of the things I'm hoping to maybe spend some time on in the next couple of weeks. Like I mentioned, now that's sweet data. It's there for the picking if we can make the time to start doing it. It's not super important, but it gives us some visibility into what images and those sorts of things.
Okay. Next one is upgrading the Prowl build clusters from 1.15 to 1.16. This is something I can't do with the Terraform files that we use to create our clusters. It turns out it's really painful, if not impossible, to create a set of Terraform files that you change to say, okay, first, before this commit, we were deploying version 1.15. After this commit, we're deploying version 1.16. It is significantly easier to use gCloud or to use the Google Cloud Console to initiate this upgrade, if it's something we want to initiate at a time and place of our choosing. If we don't care, Google will upgrade the cluster for us automatically. At least it will upgrade the control plane for us. The nodes will still have to upgrade if we want that. I feel like we do that, but yeah.
Do we have a reason not to have node auto upgrade and just opt into a channel?
Okay. They're turned on. We have not opted into a channel. I can't think of a strong reason. Just from a troubleshooting perspective, it's really useful to know when the cluster has upgraded from one version to another. So I somewhat enjoy the ability to choose when to upgrade it. But we could opt into a channel. That may require changing the Terraform files slightly.
Also, a little warning about using a channel. It may destroy the cluster because the last time trying, I had this issue. Using the current state of the Terraform file, if you introduce the channel in the current cluster, it may, I think, I need to check, but I think Terraform will recreate the cluster.
Yeah, this is just for what it's worth. This is my opinion on using Terraform to manage Kubernetes clusters is not the greatest as a result of having created it and then maintained it for the past couple of months. For reasons
It's possible to change the version without destroy cluster, but it's imply using the data version of the GK version. I will try next week and maybe submit a pull request about that.
Okay. What I have had to do in the past, for what it's worth, is update the resource manually, like go change the resource however I want to, and then re-import that resource into the Terraform state file. So I have to sort of manually do some surgery on the state file, or I have to put things back into it before Terraform's view of the world agrees with the way the world actually is.
And one of the things to not doing that is having a maintenance process when we bump the version of the provider, and also we can define the prefix of the versions of the GK cluster. So every time, plus the fact we have automatic maintenance, you don't have to really worry about the version. Because right now, AAA is 115, and before that it was 114. So we don't really have to care about maintenance. We just need to care about the major version we want to use.
Right, which is where, yeah, I feel like if we could opt into a channel, that would probably provide us far more predictable upgrades.
Yeah.
So
yes, the last thing I want to do is to have a flag day once a quarter where we all go and upgrade our various clusters. Like that just seems pointless.
Yeah. So I'll create an issue to look at how we can better reconcile. I'll create an issue about switching to channels, and we can talk about how we might need to mitigate Terraform trying to delete and recreate clusters to make that happen.
That seems like a bug in the Terraform module, honestly. Like it should be able to recognize that that is not a destructive change.
Yeah.
Like maybe we can just push that back upstream.
Yeah, that would be nice. Okay, we're 3 minutes over our scheduled hour. I really appreciate everybody hanging around. It's been great to see you, but that's all the time we have. I look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks, and happy Wednesday.
So long, farewell.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
One of these days, I'm going to remember to play exit music.